Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Zenith Glow Astrology YouTube channel, or if you are watching this video on Substack, the Zenith Glow Astrology Substack page. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you being here. My name is Christina, and I am an astrologer. In this video, we are going to discuss the upcoming new moon in Taurus. So let's go ahead and get into it. The new moon in Taurus will occur on April 27th, and it will be at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So go ahead and convert that to your own time zone as necessary. And it will be happening at 7 degrees 46 minutes of Taurus. Now, I've already been seeing a lot of astrologers kind of sending out little flashy screenshots, little quippy things to send messages about this upcoming full moon. New moon, not full moon, it's a new moon. And a lot of what they are sharing is that it's Taurus energy, so it's sweet and it's soft, and let's get comfy and cozy, and let's enjoy the new beginnings related to Taurus and manifestation and all this stuff. I think that would normally be the energy of a Taurus new moon if it were not for some very prominent other planetary configurations that are directly aspecting the new moon. Not just coinciding with it, but directly aspecting it. So we are going to talk about these other configurations and see what about them is going to change the energy of this new moon from that normal kind of soft sweetness that we would get through Taurus, and talk about what that means and also what we can do with that information, how that might impact us, what we are going to get out of this, how we can make the most of it. So let's go ahead and pull up a chart for the Taurus new moon. There we are. Hope you all can see that okay. As usual, ignore the houses in this chart. They don't matter. We are only concerned with the planets and their relationship to each other. So I know there's a lot of aspect lines on this chart, which are all the blue and red lines that you see there. But there's one big one in particular that we need to pay attention to when it comes to this new moon. You may notice, kind of buried in all those little cross lines of blue and red, that there is one really big red square. That is what we call a grand cross in astrology. It is when you have two sets of planets, so 4 planets altogether, 2 sets of planets that are opposing each other. And then within those oppositions, all 4 planets are also squaring each other. Okay, so a grand cross. That's why we call it a cross, because you have 2 sets opposing each other. It kind of forms a cross. And then, yeah, the 4 planets are squaring each other. That's what we see going on there. So the planets involved with this grand cross, we have the new moon itself, which is the moon and the sun conjunct or overlapping each other in the sign of Taurus. We have Pluto in Aquarius. We have Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio. And then we have Mars in Leo. And all 4 of these planets or bodies or mathematical points, because Black Moon Lilith is technically an imaginary mathematical point, but more on that later. All 4 of these planets are making connections to each other. And those connections we can see through that big red square. And the big red square means that they are all squaring each other, as well as having Pluto opposite of Mars, and then Black Moon Lilith opposite of the sun and moon, aka the new moon in Taurus. So this in particular is the configuration which is shifting that energy around the new moon. So yeah, normally Taurus energy is like nice and soft and sweet. It's ruled by Venus. It's a pretty chill earth sign. Taurus just likes to be harmonious and comfortable. It's great energy for manifestation, especially when it coincides with a new moon, which symbolizes new beginnings. However, A grand cross in astrology is one of the most challenging aspect configurations that we can experience. And then, because grand crosses involve 4 planets in 4 signs that are 90 degrees away from each other, that means that all of the planets in those signs are going to be in the same mode or quality. Okay, so signs in astrology are a combination of an element and a mode, or sometimes referred to as a quality. Mode, quality, it's the same thing, just different terminology describing the same thing. So we have cardinal signs, we have fixed signs, and then we have mutable signs. You may be familiar with this. Each of those carries a different quality of energy. What we have going on here with Taurus, Aquarius, Scorpio, and Leo, all 4 of these signs are of the fixed mode or quality, okay? What that means is that this energy is extra fixed. It is extra stubborn because the energy of the fixed mode in astrology is that of consistency and determination and stamina, which are some of the more positive qualities associated with that. It's also stubbornness. It is immovability. It is this energy of refusal, like refusal to change, being inflexible, being unwilling or resistant to movement, change, adaptability, all those kinds of things. And when we're talking about squares in astrology, and we're also talking about oppositions, those aspects hold kind of a similar energy because you're talking about planets that are working sort of at cross purposes. Like they want different things, they're pulling each other in different directions, and they're disagreeing about something. So there's kind of this stubborn resistance going on, and it's got this sort of conflicting energy. So when you bring in the energy of the fixed signs on top of the Grand Cross, we call this a fixed Grand Cross because those are the modes involved in the squares within this aspect configuration. So of all of the types of Grand Crosses we can have, the fixed Grand Cross is actually the most sticky. It is the most intense. It is the most frustrating. It is the most conflicting. So I want to bring this to your attention now, not because I'm trying to be a Debbie Downer or because I'm trying to say, rain on your parade or anything, your new moon parade. I just want you to be conscious that this energy is tough. It is challenging energy. You might experience impatience. You might experience frustration. You might feel this kind of stubborn energy in your life showing up in different ways. There might be this kind of sense of stagnation that's really irritating because you want to move and you want to change, but it sort of feels like you're running into roadblocks, or it feels like you're searching for answers, but you can't find any. It's just a really frustrating kind of energy. Now, if you are familiar with my work, then you know I talk about harmonious aspects versus dynamic aspects. And dynamic aspects is just another term for difficult or hard aspects. And when we talk about these 2 different kinds of aspects, there's pros and cons for each, right? Obviously, harmonious aspects feel nice when we experience them, but they're not always conducive to growth, and they don't always help us so much in the long term, right? They just kind of feel good in the short term. Conversely, dynamic aspects can be challenging in the short term, but they produce good results for the long term. They help us grow, they help us change, because it's when we are forced out of our comfort zone that we are forced to make changes, that we are forced to grow. It's through those experiences that we often learn the most, and it initiates change at the deepest levels. And that's exactly what we're looking at here. So let's also talk about the planets that are involved in this fixed grand cross aspect pattern. So we obviously have the new and the full, excuse me, the new and the full moon. We obviously have the sun and the moon forming the new moon in Taurus, okay? Now, that energy does symbolize new beginnings. There is a new beginning on offer through this new moon. That doesn't change just because of this aspect pattern we have going on. And I want you to keep that in mind because this is still good energy for manifestation. It's still a new moon. You can still manifest at this time. You can still put energy into that. It's just don't be misled to believe this is the kind of astrological event where you can, sit back and put your feet up and and play with your crystals and, you know, dig in the dirt and plant your little seeds and everything's light and fluffy. You're probably going to be like pulling your hair out at some point. You're probably going to be steaming over something at some point. And I'm not saying this is for everyone, but this is the general vibe of the energy right now. And so again, if you are not experiencing it directly in your chart, you might be witnessing other people around you experiencing it. So if you have planets in your chart that are within, we'll say 8 degrees of these other planets, okay? And we'll say within 8 degrees of 4 degrees. So if you had a planet that was at 12 degrees, or if you had a planet that was hovering around like 26 degrees, you might be feeling this energy. Just something to note, to look at. That counts for the major angles in your chart as well, like your rising sign, your midheaven, your descendant, or your IC. Okay. So if you have this aspect pattern and it is directly impacting your chart, you are more likely to feel that conflict and that frustration and that tension. And this aspect will directly be influencing you. And it plays a pivotal role in your life at this time because this is, this is a big deal. This is, yeah, this is the whole shebangy right here. And the reason I say that, and the reason this also correlates to beginnings is because of that Pluto opposite Mars thing that we have going on here. Now, I talked about Pluto opposite Mars back in January when they were making their second opposition. They've made, well, including this one here, they will have made 3 total oppositions to each other within this cyclical period. And that is because of each of their retrograde cycles. Okay, they do kind of this dancing crisscross thing with each other. So they initially crossed paths early November last year. That was the first opposition. And that was before Mars turned retrograde. Okay, so that was kind of the introduction of the theme of Pluto opposite Mars and what they are delivering to us through this cycle. And it is a cycle, it is a time of change that they are initiating. I talk a lot about this in depth in a podcast episode that I did called Challenging Your Truth. And that is available here on YouTube if you want to check out my channel, or I'll link it in the description below. So if you want to get into the nuances of Pluto opposite Mars, you can look there. I also talk about this current opposition that we are looking at here in April in depth on my Substack page. Okay, there is an article called Touching the Guru's Feet, and it is all about what Mars and Pluto are bringing to us through its opposition, this final third round. And it gets into a lot of detail and it talks about their specific degrees that they are sitting at and what that means. So I recommend you check that out if you want to explore what this means on a deeper level. I will tell you right now that through this third and final opposition, it's like the final act of this drama that they've been bringing into our lives. And in an at a glance perspective, Pluto, especially in evolutionary astrology, represents our soul and our soul's desires for evolution, what our soul craves in order to keep evolving. Now, Mars is the lower octave of Pluto, and it is one of our personal planets. So while Pluto operates on a very unconscious level because it is our soul and it's sort of operating under our conscious awareness, Mars, as the planet of desire, represents the ways that we consciously seek out experiences that are ultimately going to serve the evolution of our soul. They're not always experiences that are exactly in alignment with what the soul is seeking, but ultimately, whatever we do through Mars is going to deliver us the lessons that the soul is seeking, one way or another. And again, sometimes those things kind of come as conflicts or blows to our ego. And actually, that's kind of what we're looking at here. Having Pluto and Mars opposite of each other very much holds this energy of what our ego wants, Mars in Leo, versus what our soul is acting upon us in order to keep evolving, which is Pluto and Aquarius. Okay. We have a personal desire, a personal creative expression that we are seeking. And in my article, I talk about this specific Sabian symbol for this 4 degrees of Leo having to do with proving yourself to yourself, proving yourself to other people. On some level, there is an egoic desire to prove something. And then Pluto being in opposition to Mars here and being at that 4 degrees of Aquarius, it's almost at 4 degrees. It's like 3 degrees, 48 minutes. And so the Sabian symbol for 4 degrees of Aquarius is the guru healer. So what we have going on is this egoic desire to prove something, whether we're doing it for ourselves, whether we're doing it for other people, or both. But there is a desire to pursue something at the conscious ego level. Meanwhile, the soul has its own agenda. It is a higher agenda. There is a higher purpose. There is a divine will at work in our lives. And because Pluto is kind of the destroyer, it is the planet of death and rebirth. What we have going on is a challenge to our ego. We have a challenge to what it is that we are seeking to accomplish in the world, whatever our drive and desire is, whatever that creative expression is that we are seeking to fulfill. We are being challenged from a spiritual level to kind of alter that path in some way because there is a divine will, whether that's something coming from like the celestial realms or your understanding of God or the universe or whatever, or whether that's your higher self or whether that's just the nature of your soul and what you crave for spiritual evolution. However you want to label it, that thing has its own agenda and it is going to implement the lessons that it seeks to have. And those lessons involve totally transforming what your conscious ego is seeking to accomplish. So again, we have this tension going on here because we have these two bodies that are very much literally in opposition to each other, pulling in different directions, wanting different things. Guess what? Pluto is the heavy hitter here. It is going to win the battle because Pluto and any outer planet acting on an inner planet is the one that's going to be influencing the expression of the inner planet. So we have that going on, and that is very tense, conflicting energy. Both of these points are squaring the new moon, right? But then we bring in Black Moon Lilith. Now, Black Moon Lilith is a mathematical point. She is not an actual physical body. I wrote an article about this on my Substack. I went into a huge deep dive all about Black Moon Lilith, what she is, what she represents, the different versions of Lilith, how she acts in our lives, all this kind of stuff. And I even drew a little diagram to show what she is, and I'll just talk about that briefly here. But again, Black Moon Lilith is a mathematical point. So we have the moon orbiting around the Earth, but it doesn't orbit in a perfect circle. It actually orbits in an ellipse, okay? Meaning that it's kind of oblong. So that creates this kind of oblong orbital shape that takes place between the Earth and the sun. This Black Moon Lilith point the one that we are referencing here. I won't get into it, but there's other versions of Black Moon Lilith in astrology. She represents that fixed point that is between the Earth and the Sun, but the moon still orbits around that point. So it's within the moon's orbital path, but it is at the far end between the Sun and the Earth, if that makes sense. And you can see it in my expertly drawn diagram here. Okay. And therefore, she represents this kind of darkness that is sitting between the earth and the sun, and through which the moon, which is like our unconscious self, our emotional conditioning, orbits through. It orbits around that point, right? So, in some ways, Black Moon Lilith is like a doorway to consciousness, right? Because she's sort of this dark portal, because she's literally black, like this blackness, this emptiness that's sitting at that point, holding gravitational weight, though. And she's sitting in front of the sun. So it's like if the sun is consciousness, in order for us to get to the sun, we have to go through this dark portal. And that dark portal represents our shadow selves. And that is exactly what Black Moon Lilith represents in astrology, among other things. And I'm keeping this somewhat simplified. So again, if you want to study this in depth, go check out the article that I wrote. But Black Moon Lilith often shows us what we have repressed within ourselves. She shows us the ways in which we feel judged, outcast, ostracized, and rejected by other people. And she can actually be a point of unconscious rage and anger and bitterness and resentment within us, but it's something that we push down and we don't want to acknowledge because there's kind of this hidden shame and guilt, and again, like feelings of rejection if we go and like poke that little part of our psyche. However, while all of this sounds like dark and kind of dreary, again, she's the portal to consciousness. So when we are able to go into those dark aspects of ourselves and face them and integrate them in our psyche, what happens is we come into contact with a new sense of power within ourselves. We feel empowered. Suddenly, when we can heal those parts of ourselves that we have repressed, those parts of ourselves that we have been kind of pushing away because they make us uncomfortable and they pull up feelings that don't make us feel very good about ourselves, that force us to look at our relationships and different aspects of our lives in ways that maybe we're not wanting to face, we actually come into a new sense of empowerment within ourselves because suddenly we're not pushing that part of ourselves away. We are integrating it, accepting it, and becoming it in its higher form, right? Because the shadow will act as the shadow so long as it is ignored. But once we integrate it into our conscious awareness, we can then consciously build it up to a higher level of expression, right? That is, in a nutshell, easy peasy, right? That's what Black Moon Lilith symbolizes. So, on top of that, she's in the sign of Scorpio. Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, okay? And Scorpio is this sign of very deep transformation, and it is the shadow, and it is looking at the dark parts of ourselves, and it is getting in contact with how we feel disempowered in our lives. We have to look at all of that stuff if we want to come into true power, or at least power that resonates with integrity. And that is what the divine wants for us. That is what this God force, this universal consciousness, this benevolent creator force wants for us. It doesn't want us to just be acting out the will of our ego and satisfying those little feel good feelings just to serve ourselves. It wants us to serve a greater purpose, which we can see through that Pluto in Aquarius. And again, Pluto rules Scorpio, so that means that Pluto is ruling Black Moon Lilith at this time. So she's sort of acting on behalf of Pluto as well. The two of them are in cahoots within this big grand fixed cross that we're dealing with here. So thanks, guys. So we have a lot of tense energy because all of these points are squaring each other, all right, and opposing each other. So that means that in order to get to this new beginning that the new moon symbolizes, and mind you, new moon in Taurus, not only are we talking about the physical 3D, and that is part of it, right? We are talking about manifestation. We are talking about cultivating physical security, manifesting physical things like money and resources, maybe a new job, maybe a new home, maybe different accoutrements that are going to help you live a better life and feel cozy in your life. That's good. That's all part of it, right? But the deeper level to that has to do with your self-worth. And it has to do with what makes you feel comfortable and complete into yourself, what makes you feel safe in yourself. Okay. And Taurus is all about physical survival, but it comes through us learning that we can provide for ourselves, and we can only provide for ourselves if we can truly love ourselves, because you have to feel worthy of it before you can welcome it into your life, right? So, having this entire new beginning means that we have to confront all these other parts of ourselves first. Okay, we have the ego through Mars in that Leo sign. Like, I've got something to prove. I have something I need to create. I've got to make this happen. People are counting on me. I'm counting on me. This is what I want to do. It sounds like fun, Leo, right? But Pluto says, you got to take it to a higher level. How are you serving other people? This is only serving you. This is not divine will. You can create, you can co-create with the universe, but you can't leave the universe out of it. You can't just take the reins and make it all yours. You have to co-create, right? So Pluto is acting on Mars to change, to transform. And in order to do that, we have to go into the Black Moon Lilith portal first, right? To get into contact with the sun, to get into contact with true consciousness, right? And the sun rules Leo, yes? So we are going through a transition period right now through this new moon. So it is a new beginning. It is a new beginning. But it's also a transition because we are, I mean, I know it's cliche and I know we've been saying it a lot with the eclipses and all of that, but endings and beginnings are two sides of the same coin, right? So we have something that has to come to an end first in order to start this new beginning, because the new beginning isn't just what we have created from our ego level, it is something that we have co-created along with the divine, right? We have to heal something in ourselves first. There's stuff that needs to be healed. There's stuff that we have to look at, because whatever the divine has in store for us, we cannot accomplish it. We cannot go into that mission, into that purpose, if we're still carrying all this old repressed baggage. Because ultimately, that repressed baggage is going to get in the way. And it's going to go into that Mars expression where suddenly we get a little bit of power. And before you know it, you're kind of power hungry. You're kind of power tripping. And even the best of us do this because our ego is a sneaky son of a bitch. And I'm sorry for the language, but it is so true. You can be the sweetest, kindest, most good-hearted person in the world. Guess what? You still have an ego. And I bet that when people tell you that you're sweet and good-hearted and kind, it kind of feels good, doesn't it? That's your ego. So the ego is a really, really sneaky thing. And it operates below our awareness, right? And it's okay to have an ego. It's not that this is a bad thing. You know, the ego is the anchor for our consciousness. It allows us to have this personality as a human being in this life. We need it to survive in the 3D. The problem is when we become overly attached to our ego. And the other problem is when that attachment gets in the way of whatever our spiritual purpose is or whatever the divine creative force of the universe has in store for us, right? Because there's always a higher purpose at play. And that higher purpose always has to do with whatever the evolutionary impulse of your soul is. And guess what? Your soul is always going to win. No matter what. The question is, do you acquiesce willingly to those lessons where they will still be a little bit tricky, but they might be a little bit softer? Or do you resist and resist and resist and resist until you're confronted with some major crisis and then you're forced to make the changes that your soul is asking of you? This is the entire dynamic of Pluto, you guys. This is how it operates in our lives. So just keep in mind, this energy is really intense. It's really tricky energy. It is very frustrating because each one of these planets is basically saying, like, you don't get to move forward until you deal with all of this stuff. And this stuff is partially subconscious, it's partially unconscious, it's deep, latent, buried stuff within us. So it's not so easy to just be like, yeah, I got it. Like, I'm going to go and check this off my list. Okay, got it. Dealt with these repressed feelings there. Got it. No problem. We can move forward. It's not always that easy, right? Because again, the ego is a sneaky SOB. So just keep in mind, there's going to be some tension, there's going to be some frustration, there's going to be some conflict, there's going to be some friction around this placement. But know when you are experiencing those things, it is ultimately leading you to a much better place, a place that you could not have conceived of on your own. Okay, this is coming through divine will. We can also see this because we have Neptune at 1 degree of Aries, okay, recently moved into Aries, right? Neptune is trine with Mars and it is sextile with Pluto at the time of this new moon. All right, now I am actually planning on doing a Neptune video at some point because I personally learned some very harsh lessons from Neptune recently. People always think of Neptune as like, oh, it's unconditional love and it's all about consciousness and it's sweet and it's the higher octave of Venus. And that's all true, but Neptune, whoo, 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 whoo. If you feel a transit of Neptune and it aspects your chart directly, it is scary, you guys, because Neptune dissolves things. And I just want to mention with Neptune being in Aries, Aries has to do with the self. It has to, it's ruled by Mars, so it is tied into our ego and our identity. That means that Neptune is dissolving what we know to be true about ourselves, okay? It went through this entire transit in Pisces where we were cultivating all of these spiritual beliefs, and then it crossed that 29th degree between Pisces and Aries. Guess what? It's like what we thought we knew, particularly from the spiritual perspective, the consciousness perspective, is getting dissolved, and we are being broken down to ground zero within ourselves so that we have to rebuild from scratch, okay? Again, guided by divine will, it's all supposed to happen. It's there for a reason. It's ultimately going to serve our highest good. But when you're going through that process, it's chaos. Neptune is the ruler of Pisces, and Pisces governs the axis of fear and faith. And fear and faith are on the same axis because when you don't have a hope that something has your best interest at heart, that something is guiding you to something better, that something is coming from unconditional love, it's really easy to slide down the axis over into fear and chaos and desperation and wow. So I'm pointing that out as well because these are harmonious aspects that Neptune is making to Mars and Pluto, but Neptune transits are by nature very challenging in and of themselves, even the harmonious aspects, okay? So it is giving us tools that we can use through Mars, or excuse me, it is giving us tools that we can use through Pluto, and it is really helping Mars to form this new identity. Okay, it's really helping it to do that. But again, the nature of Neptune is to dissolve things and to break them down first. And our sweet little egos love their definitions and their boundaries and the structure that we have built for ourselves. So that experience of going through that can be incredibly challenging. And I just wanted to point that out to you in case you are going through something like that. Just know it's not going to last forever. And just know it's all there to serve your highest good because whatever was going on previously, in whatever way, it needed to be broken down, it needed to be dissolved so that you could rebuild something that is stronger and something that is more in alignment with your life's purpose and where you're heading in the future. Ultimately, these transits serve us by testing us and by ensuring that we are in spiritual integrity, okay? Because again, it's really easy to get misled by the ego. So, We have that going on. This is a time of transition. So for some of us, it might be different for everyone. You might get to experience more of the new beginning kind of energy at this time, and that's fun. Or you might be experiencing more of the transition energy of like this thing is ending, or it already ended and I'm not really sure where I'm at now. There could be this feeling of being caught in between, and that can come through that fixed grand cross because it's like holding the tension of nothingness. You know what I mean? Like as humans, we like to have a clear path forward. We like to have definitions. We like to have direction. So if you're kind of just sitting in the uncomfortable limbo, that in and of itself can create a lot of friction and pressure. So some of us might be feeling that energy. And the recommendation is to just go as much as you can, to just go into patience and understand that divine timing is a legit thing. Okay. And as much as our little limited 3D minds want to plot every little step out and know exactly where we're headed every moment of every given day, sometimes that's just not how it works. And sometimes we have to surrender a little bit and trust that the path will be revealed to us as we are ready to take the next step. Okay. So, and it takes wisdom to go into that kind of trust and to be able to surrender that way without freaking out. So there's that aspect of it. And then again, through this new moon, we are being offered some beautiful healing. And the healing can be kind of rough. Okay. So again, I want to just stress that this could be a difficult time for some of you, especially if it's making direct aspects to your chart. And again, I am speaking from personal experience, so I'm there with you. I feel you. I love you. I got your back. We're in this together. All right. But that healing process, the reason why it can be difficult is because it's sort of like facing difficult truths about yourself, about your life, about your path, about what you believe. It can come through a lot of different avenues, right? Um, but it's sort of this feeling of loss. And that is, by the way, one of the ways that Neptune operates through transit. It forces us to experience loss because, again, it's dissolution, right? So we make our plans and we put all of our hopes and our faith into something. And then Neptune comes along and it's like, oh, is that your little bubble of hope that you've blown up for yourself? Pop. And then everything kind of collapses into chaos. And then we question everything, right? That's the nature of of the Neptunian transit. So it can be, it's about dissolution. It's about dissolution, and it can feel very, very upsetting. But just know that these things happen again because there is something else that we're supposed to do, or we're supposed to do what we were going to do in a different way. In some way, we were getting in our own way. I'm sorry, I know that's really repetitive. Way. But it's true. In some manner, we were impeding the divine plan. Okay, we were getting in our own way, or we had created something that was going to cause problems later, or whatever it was, it just wasn't fully in alignment with what is meant for us. So Neptune comes in and it kind of wipes everything out so that we are forced to start over from scratch. And then we use our wisdom to kind of rebuild from there. And so we might find ourselves actually, as we move through this healing process and we kind of experience the grief and the loss and we surrender to those changes, we might find ourselves filled with new inspiration and new ideas. So that is also part of the gift of this transit. New modes of self-expression, new creative inspirations, suddenly new directions start to present themselves, right? The old path dissolves, but then when we're ready, the new path reveals itself. So that is very much the new beginning. And again, endings, limbo, new beginnings, it's all kind of folded into this event. And each of us is going to be at a different place in that process. But just know we are experiencing a kind of transition, a kind of rebirth through this process, okay? So that is the new moon in Taurus. I also want to mention, just to kind of layer on a little bit because this wasn't intense enough on its own, this is also a super moon. So again, even though we won't be able to see the moon because it's a new moon, it's a super moon, which means that in its little orbital cycle, that the you can look my little yellow moon orbiting the Earth there. It means that the moon is closer to the Earth in its ecliptic, okay, in its ellipse, in its orbital cycle. And when the moon is closer to the Earth, when we have supermoons, we tend to experience that energy more palpably, more acutely. So the moon governs our emotions. We're dealing with healing, we're dealing with Black Moon Lilith, we're dealing with Pluto, with Mars, with all of these different planetary configurations at this time. So I'm just letting y'all know, okay? Emotions could be running high right now. You might be feeling things very acutely. And that's why I wanted to really cover this stuff in depth in this video, because it can just be a lot, all right? Change is hard for most of us. Maybe some of you out there are super flexible and nothing, nothing sticks to you, everything rolls off your back. That's great. Life must be a lot of fun for you. But for most of us, we need a little bit of that stability in our lives, and we do like to cling to those crystallizations. So just know that change can be really challenging. But again, we are being guided into a new beginning. You will be led to the next steps when you are ready. This is all about having trust and faith and sort of submitting to the will of the divine and believing that that has your best interest at heart. And know that you are completely shedding your old skin. Once again, folks, we are in the year of the wood snake, right? The snake is transformation, and the element of wood is about building something and having really abundant growth in that process of building. So we are making leaps and bounds this year in our growth and transformation, but it does require a lot of letting go of what doesn't serve us anymore. And that is exactly what we're doing now. So just hang in there. Know that this is intense energy. Once again, it is a good time to manifest. So if you want to put energy into manifesting, it is a new moon in Taurus. And once again, if you want to manifest along the themes of Taurus, Taurus does rule earth energy. It does have to do with money and with security and with the things that you can physically own. So by all means, go crazy if that's what you want to do. It's there for you, it's on offer for you, but also just know that you might be having some intense emotions, and some of those emotions might be frustrating, they might be conflicting, it might make you feel impatient, it might make you feel angry, you might have stuff that's been long buried suddenly coming out, erupting from you. Just know it's all part of the process, and all we can do is really meet ourselves with love and compassion and try to go into patience and try to go into that higher wisdom where we're taking a step back and we're detaching from what's in front of us and recognizing the greater lesson at hand, the greater direction in which we are being led. Okay. So I hope that this new moon in Taurus proves to be a huge period of growth for you, a huge opportunity to shift in your trajectory, to level up in your life, and to finally come into your greatest sense of fulfillment if you're not already feeling that now. I hope that you move through it gracefully and as peacefully as possible. And I want to say thank you so much for watching this video. Once again, my name is Christina. This is Zenith Glow Astrology. If you want to see how this transit is going to impact you personally, I do astrology readings. I will put my information below where you can schedule that with me. You can check me out on Substack. I'm on Instagram, and then obviously I'm here on YouTube. You're watching me now. You found me. You figured it out. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all, and I will catch you all later. Bye.